Good evening.
Good evening.
This thing's hot.
Not out here.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit different thing than I normally do. Normally I would do spoken word, but I'm gonna read some of my personal written poems. So I'm gonna be reading off of some sheets of paper, unfortunately.
That's okay.
Thank you. But I also want to read some other people's work because I think that as a community of writers and a community of artists, we are inspired by other artists.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read some other people's work and the work that inspired my work. So if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of poems here, paired. So there's like 3 pairs. This first poem's by Ila Kaminsky, and he's a deaf poet who's from, I'm trying to remember the name of the town he's from, but from the former Soviet Union. And he wrote a book recently that just blew me away. It's called Deaf Republic, and it's about war. And these 2 poems I'm going to read, one is his and one is mine, and they're both about war. And this one's called We Lived Happily During the War. And when they bombed other people's houses, we protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed. Around my bed, America was falling. Invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous reign, in the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war. So that poem inspired me to write a love poem, which is, they're in this collection, they're all love poems during war, and I wrote this poem called Love Poem Written During the War. Once, in nearly eternal autumn, I believed the American dream was still alive. The soldiers wouldn't have to march off toward their last cigarette break. Your eyes remain heavy like darkened quartz, dirtied with veins of lust. Somewhere, someone will remember your strong hands, as though they were frigates that carried them to safe passage. In this country, everyone ought to do themselves the favor of learning to speak as to prevent the end of the world. Just remember your lover as a canticle of water. Language in America, my love, is a shovel we've used to throw dirt over the caskets. It should be used instead to unearth the bodies, to resurrect them and hand them a Greyhound bus ticket homebound. Or better yet, keep us in conversation long enough to heal. Somewhere, someone remembers your body heat in the arms of another. I was, still am, mistaken about so many things. So I think we've all heard the maxim or like the phrase, "You're just like your parents," or like you grew up just like your parents. So that's what this next poem, this is my poem, is about, and I'll read the poem that inspired this one. This is just called "We Grow Up to Be Just Like Our Parents." You could have all the wretched wealth in the world, but you chose her lullaby. Your mother's attempt at singing was heartfelt, but lacked breadth. Yes, we don't talk bad about our mothers. They can only tell you about premonition. My son will grow up to be an archaeologist, etc., etc. You never tell her your heart was half buried already. I turned out to be a poet scrambling to find his glasses to better see the world as it wasn't. This is why sometimes purgatory is a small home for a family of 4. Inactions, too, can become behaviors. Later, a tall glass and a cigarette. Much later, admonition and relapse. I become the nail upon which all my family's shame hangs upon. I become the rough that refuses to diamond. It's not entirely their fault. I didn't publicly speak until I was 4 because I was afraid the world wouldn't hear what I had to say. By 8, I knew the goal of all life was taking a final breath. I remember waiting for my father to return home, my mother having both sang to me and scolded me. If you look backward through a mental telescope, a child's face against the window smudging the glass, and what lay beyond it, into memory. What remains of this is the fact I wouldn't change it, for my heart remains buried in her chickadee voice. They fuck you up, your mom and dad, but it's worth it to unearth the only heart you'll ever have. So that poem was a rebuttal, actually, to This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin, which is a little ballad that goes, they fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands-on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out early as you can, and don't have any kids yourself. So this next poem is a little bit longer, but the poem that inspires is a little shorter, so I'm going to try to speed through this next one.
No, take it.
Take my time? Okay, I was making sure that was okay. That's because of the head there. This poem has got me a lot of recognition, and I'm not saying that as like a toot my horn, but I don't see it as that way. This was a poem written in response to another poem in a style that the poet wrote in, and this is a litany in which forgiveness is granted to all things above and below. Always the twilight, a burning car crash. Always the car crash towed away by the moon. Always the stars gather and grind their way to some rhythm we think we understand. And, as always, none of these things ask for permission. Sometimes I touch myself to remind me I can still feel. Sometimes I touch others to remind me there are others. Sometimes I touch the gardenias to feel the softness of this world. Sometimes I allow the hailstorm to pelt me, to feel the boreal burn of ice usurping my assurance of order. Often, God takes vacations when I'm drowning. Often, God takes sabbatical when I hurt myself. Often, God takes liberties with how we will be healed, unhealed. Often, God takes. Always the love I give is taken for granted. Always the moon slurs what I mean underneath its glow. Always the sky cannot make up its mind what eyeshadow to wear. And as always, none of these things ask permission. Sometimes I feel the prick of tears in my eye. Sometimes I feel tethered to letters sick in my blood. Sometimes I feel a burning bush crackle between my ribs. Sometimes I feel. Often I know that what's right does not always soothe. Often I know the square root of sorrow is internal hatred. Often I know my queerness equates with erasure. Often I know I will keep on living this way. I taste the honey from a dead lover's fingertip. It is good. Taste the bitter memory of her teeth on my lip. It is good. I smell the flagrant blasphemy of my own blood at my nose. It is good. I smell the flagrant miracle of rainwater and petunias. it is good. I hear the nightmares of my past rattle themselves with warning. I hear the wet dreams of my youth creaking in old beds. I've touched far too much. I've touched little overall. I've watched God apply mascara and flail through electric guitars. All I know is perfect. All I am could be. All I know is the regrettable and have learned. All I know is forgiveness is for anything good in this world, which is everything, which is green and growing, loud and braying, seductive and prude, decaying or aged, which is God and this fallen world, which is that forgiveness is as much for them as it is for me. So the litany form was kind of already long time ago created for church and religious issues and really reasons in poetry, but I couldn't find the litany I wanted to read by this poet, so I'm going to read one of his most famous poems. He inspired that last poem. It's by Richard Seekin. It's called Scheherazade. And it's also a queer poem, which I like about that. Tell me about the dream where we pull the bodies out of the lake and dress them in warm clothes again. How it was late and no one could sleep, the horses running until they forgot that they are horses. It's not like a tree where the roots have to end somewhere. It's more like a song on a policeman's radio. How we rolled up the carpet so we could dance and the days were bright red, and every time we kissed, there was another apple to slice into pieces. Look at the light through the window pane. That means it's noon. That means we're inconsolable. Tell me how all of this, and love too, will ruin us. These are bodies possessed by light. Tell me we'll never get used to it. And I have a question. Do I have time to read one more? Because I got some new shit. I got some new shit.
Yeah. Shit new.
Okay, you should do. Okay, so this is that's just something I had to find because I don't have a lot of new shit. I've been working my ass off at work, so I haven't really had time to write. So I actually found the time a couple weeks ago to write. This is the only thing I got. So
That's good.
this is titled Hydroplane. This is my last one. The rain and the trees all looked blurry. All the same smudge of cypress gray and watery green, and there, by the shoulder, was an ambulance rotating the classic primary colors of urgency and impending dread. It reminded me of an anti-joke someone had once told me for what is life but shit happening to everyone at the wrong, most unheeded times, where he asked me the question, what did little Johnny get for Christmas when he was cooped up at the hospital? The answer is cancer. Kind of how years ago in the same spot, I hit the guardrail at 50 miles per hour, totaling my father's car. Somehow climbing out of the wreckage, unscathed, only my fingers trembling. I thought sometimes in an alternate universe I might have died, either by the accident or my own father's hands. But in this universe, it's been years, and I have my own car now, still smoking a cigarette and flecking ash out the window like it's a job to rid oneself of the refuse of his vices. Even though Mama didn't raise a quitter. But knowing I should hold myself accountable for my slow suicide down I-40, taking my life for granted, as a stretcher is quickly lifted and rolled into the back of an open ambulance. Life is opulent like that. So many facets. Someone has a good day, someone has a bad day, but it's the same day. The rain pelts the windshield rapidly now, harder, with the sound kind of like 1,000 nuthatches opening their wings and fluttering at once. Who's to say I didn't die a little that day on the side of the road? I didn't drive for 3 years, fearing the insurance was so much slack in its responsibility, fearing I had to turn in my license, fearing I would stay stuck in a town and having to hobo my way everywhere. I eventually moved through it, the fear of driving again. Because the only way to go anywhere is to leave the past behind, like looking in a rearview mirror just to look back up at where you're going. Like watching the rain slow and that first crepuscular ray of sun sow through a cloud, like a needle through flesh. This thin silver of the thread, returning a wound back into skin. Thank you so much.